What, and I'm listening to the debate, what problem are we trying to solve here today with a bill that was given to us with a message of necessity from the governor?
We're trying to address the fact that the United States Supreme Court overturned a law in New York that was over 100 years old, um, and we're trying to deal with that. As you know, the Supreme Court on June 23rd issued their decision in the case that I mentioned earlier, finding that there's a constitutional right to carry a handgun outside the home for self-defense. And the previous laws, as I said, stood for over 100 years. And they said New York's proper cause requirement for obtaining an unrestricted license to carry a concealed firearm violates the 14th Amendment in that it prevents law-abiding citizens with an ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. So what we're trying to do here today is to pass legislation that will conform with the guidelines of that ruling, but at the same time not allow there to be rampant, um, you know, violations of what we think are important to New York. So we can have it both ways. We can pass legislation that will do a job, but conform with the ruling of the Supreme Court, because they are the highest court in the land, after all. So, and this bill, we believe, and I'm certain, does just that, such that it will be successfully defended even up to the highest court.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, and I thought your initial reaction to my question of what problem we're trying to solve, the problem that you listed off the bat was the United States Supreme Court's decision. I would say that the highest court in the land, as you point out, is not a problem to solve. They are the law of the land, and when they make a 6-3 supermajority decision on something that's constitutional or unconstitutional in the state of New York, I would say we should probably all stand up and listen, because we do raise our right hands and swear to uphold that Constitution. Getting into this bill, permit applications for concealed carry have allowed military qualification in place of a pistol permit safety course. Under this enacted new bill that you're bringing forward today, will active duty soldiers at Fort Drum or another military installation have a waiver for new requirements? Will they be able to use their military qualification to waive those requirements?
Yeah. The military is exempt from licensing requirements.
Through you, Mr.
Active duty.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I'm not talking about active duty firearms on a military installation. I'm talking about privately held firearms that they wish to conceal carry in the state of New York, and they happen to be active duty military members. They won't, under the bill that you're bringing forward today that the governor sent to our desks, they won't have to apply for a pistol permit whatsoever in the state of New York?
I think they will. Let me just double check.
I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Active duty military personnel are exempted. Active duty military personnel.
Okay, so active duty military personnel, when bringing pistols, just to be clear about this, I'm going to get a lot of questions. Obviously, my assembly district abuts Fort Drum. There's a number of soldiers in 3 brigades there. We have a lot of active duty soldiers here in the state of New York. It's the only Army active duty installation that's a major power projection platform in the Northeast. Many of those soldiers bring firearms and apply for concealed carry permits in the state of New York. Currently, they're still part of the system. You're telling me under the new law, they won't have to apply for a concealed carry permit at all. They'll be able to carry concealed wherever they'd like in the state of New York without having to apply for anything. Is that what you're telling me?
What I'm telling you is that the 2 new crimes under the penal law that we create, criminal possession of a firearm, rifle, or shotgun in a sensitive location, or criminal possession of a weapon in a restricted location, there is a list of categories of people who are exempt, for whom this would not apply, and active duty military personnel are among them. But let me just check one other thing.
Okay, that doesn't answer my question. I'm asking specifically.
Let me finish, okay? Because I want to give you the
Go
right
ahead.
information. Persons, now this is a and this is current. Persons in the military or other service of the United States in pursuit of official duty or when duly authorized by federal law, regulation, or order to possess the same, they're exempt from the licensing requirement. Yes, I mean, they're exempt if they're doing their official.
Once again, through you, Mr. Speaker, seeking clarity. I'm not talking about active duty military personnel and their official duties. I'm talking about active duty military personnel who are qualified on weapons, who have traditionally been able to submit those qualifications with a pistol permit application in order to have their privately held firearms legally here in the state of New York and carry them concealed.
If it's not their military weapons, if it's a personal weapon, that is not exempt.
So their current training, military qualification under this change will not suffice as a waiver to all of the new requirements that you're putting forward here today. Is that what I understand?
What I just said, if it's their personal weapon, it's not exempted. If it's military, then it is.
Okay, Mr. Speaker. Wow. Why the message of necessity on this bill?
Well, I believe that that was issued, that was requested or put out by the governor, but the Constitution provides for a message of necessity as a mechanism to pass legislation more quickly. I don't. I suppose we could wait a couple more days into the July 4th weekend. I'm sure many of you would like to do that, but this is important, and the governor deemed this to be extremely important in order to react appropriately to the ruling by the Supreme Court, the 6-3 ruling, and I think she made the right call on that.
When's this bill go into effect? You said
September 1st,
September 1st.
2022.
But we needed a message of necessity in bill language that was submitted 15, 16 hours ago right now to address a bill that's not going to go into
I
effect.
can't answer that, but once again, not relevant to the specifics of the bill. But yes.
Well, through you, Mr. Speaker, I think it's relevant to the state of New York, the citizens that we represent, and when we're talking about a constitutional right, I think the openness in government, we have to be very careful about messages of necessity when we're talking about constitutional rights. But I do want to ask a follow-up question. I heard the dialogue earlier about carrying in the Adirondack Park. I noticed that there's a number of sensitive areas that are named. And earlier in debate, you named the Adirondack Park as one of those sensitive areas. Are you aware that trails can cross through both public and private land in the Adirondack Park?
I'm sorry, who can cross?
Trails.
Trails.
That citizens of the state of New York use in the park. Some of them cross both public and private land.
I'm not aware, but thank you for letting me know that. I mean, you're certainly much more knowledgeable on that than I would be.
No problem, and it's one of those reasons that daylight on a piece of legislation like this is good, because then you can receive feedback on it before you bring it to the floor and the governor signs it into law. You mentioned earlier that on private lands within the Adirondack Park, a concealed carry would be allowed, but on the public areas of a very large portion of New York State, someone won't be able to carry concealed. That's correct?
With the following provisos, on the private land, the owners, I guess, could allow it, as indicated earlier, and I'm sorry. Yeah. If you read the actual wording of the legislation, and I mentioned it earlier, when we're dealing with sensitive locations, the person would have to either know or should have had reason to know that such a location is what we define as a sensitive location.
Okay. How would the black bear know?
How would the what? I'm sorry, it's a little hard to hear sometimes.
So in May, and this doesn't happen very often, luckily, but in May, a 12-year-old boy was attacked in Harriman State Park, not in the Adirondacks, by a black bear. How would bears know which areas of the Adirondack Park or other parks in the state of New York, which areas are public and private?
I'm pretty sure a bear would not know.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do you believe the United States citizens have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms?
Do I what?
Do you believe that the United States citizens, the citizens of this country, have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms?
I don't think that my personal opinion is relevant to this legislation one way or the other, so it hardly matters what I think in terms of that.
Mr. Speaker, on the bill.
On the bill.
So the United States Supreme Court, by a supermajority, and I know many in this House love to throw supermajorities in our face. You know, elections have consequences. This is the power that we have. We can do what we please. In a 6-3 decision, the highest court in the land found New York State guilty of violating the United States Constitution. That's essentially what they found. The same people who created catch and release for criminals are now in New York. They see no problem. They see no consequence. Right after a violation of the United States Constitution, seek to violate it once more. Justice Thomas, he said the United States citizens have a broad right to carry a handgun outside the home. I don't see any problem with any member of this body, and not to pick on the sponsor who probably only recently saw the language that the governor shoved through with a message of necessity as well. But I don't see any problem with any member of this body who swore an oath, upheld up their right hand and swore an oath to uphold the Constitution, with saying, yeah, I'm familiar with the Second Amendment, of course. I swore an oath to uphold it. Of course, I believe that United States citizens have a right to keep and bear arms. The courts also, so Justice Thomas also said courts should uphold restrictions only if there's a history of these restrictions, either in the country or in that state. This bill offers a number of restrictions that don't meet the court's bar whatsoever. They don't meet the high bar of the court or the low bar or any at all. 16-hour classes, accuracy tests for marksmanship, background checks that include what you posted on Facebook, prohibition in a host of newly named sensitive areas to include large swaths of land like the Adirondack Park, ammunition databases. There's no history of this in the state of New York. This is a bunch of new unconstitutional stuff that violates everybody's oath that they swore to uphold, and they know that the U.S. Constitution will be upheld by the United States Supreme Court, and this will be thrown out. But they're doing it with a message of necessity just before a holiday weekend for nothing but politics. The U.S. Supreme Court said New York's restrictions are a constitutional right, cannot be arbitrary. You offer these restrictions on a constitutional right. You've demonstrated no historical tradition that delimits the outer bounds of the right to keep and bear arms today. There's a lot of reasons to call a special session in the state of New York, maybe even some things that you could do with a message of necessity. People are dying of fentanyl overdoses, fentanyl that's been sent here from China. New Yorkers are dying every day, sometimes in violent ways, as you point out. New Yorkers are continually fleeing this state, and our population continues to decline. Food prices have gone up. Retirement plans are in the tanks. Inflation has attacked people's finances. Gas is $5 a gallon. Industry and business can't find labor, and even used cars have gone up by 35%. There's a lot of issues that we could address as a legislature, and instead, the state of emergency that is continually in place and suspends an open meetings law, and we call this special session to misuse a message of necessity on some half-baked plans and call this extraordinary session solely for the purposes of violating the United States Constitution.